They say the laughter you hear at the old playground is the ghosts of children. I know the truth. The laughter isn't some echo of the past. It's a lure. And what it's luring you into is so much worse than any ghost story you've ever heard. My name is Alex. For the better part of a year, I've been pretty sure I'm losing my mind. It started when I moved into the small two-story house on Elm Street. It's the kind of house people call charming, which is just a polite way of saying it's old, and groans in places that have no business groaning. But it was cheap, it was quiet, and it came with a perfect clear view of the town's forgotten playground. From my office window on the second floor, I could see the whole thing. The rusted swing set, its chains singing a sad song whenever the wind picked up, the faded yellow slide peeling under the sun, the lonely merry-go-round, its once bright horses now just chipped and weather-beaten. It was a relic, an empty stage for actors who were never coming back. Of course, the townsfolk had their stories. Every small town does. The local legend was that the playground was haunted. The Whispering Park, they called it, or sometimes just the Dead Children's Playground. The story changed depending on who told it, but the main parts were always the same. It was built near a place of sorrow, some said on unmarked graves from the 1918 flu pandemic. Others claimed it was the site of an old orphanage that burned down. The legend claimed that on quiet nights, if you listened close enough, you could hear them, faint, ghostly laughter of children playing in the dark. I'm a skeptic by nature. I'm a writer. My job is to make up horrors, not to actually believe in them. I heard the stories from the woman at the grocery store, from the mailman who told me not to leave my windows open at night. I'd just nod politely, give them a weak smile, and file it, all away under cute local folklore. Ghosts of kids on swings? It was a sad, poetic idea, but that's all. It was just the wind, an old structure settling, the power of suggestion. The human brain is great at finding patterns where there are none, at turning the moan of wind through a fence into a whisper. I know how these stories get started. I make a living off it. For the first few months, the playground was just scenery, a quiet, kind of sad backdrop to my life. I work late, usually until 2 or 3 in the morning, with only the glow of my monitor for light. My desk faces the window, and I'd often just stare out at the empty playground, lost in thought. The one flickering streetlight cast long, creepy shadows across the wood chips. The swings would sometimes sway, but I always just figured it was the wind. There was a peace to its stillness, a deep silence that helped me focus. It was my quiet corner of the world. I moved here for the silence. I was never scared. Why would I be? It was just a playground, metal and plastic slowly losing a fight with the elements. The stories were just that, stories. Maybe something I could use in my own work. I even thought about writing a short story about the ghost children. It felt like a harmless, almost comforting local quirk. The idea that something innocent could stick around after death felt more romantic than terrifying. I felt a weird sort of pity for these supposed spirits, these echoes of joy trapped in a place of decay. I was wrong, I was so wrong. I shouldn't have been pitying them. I should have been pitying myself, because I was the one who was trapped. I just didn't know it yet. The first time I heard it, it was late, probably close to 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. There was no wind that night. The air was heavy and still, the kind of crushing silence you get right before a summer storm. I was staring at a blank page, the cursor blinking at me, mocking me. And then I heard it, a sound so faint I almost missed it. Laughter. It was distant, a high-pitched little giggle that was right on the edge of my hearing. It was a kid's laugh, no doubt. My first rational thought was that someone's kid was up late. Maybe a neighbor's TV was on, a window left open. I got up and went to my window, looking out into the dark. The street was empty. The houses around me were dark. Everyone was asleep. And the playground, sitting under that sick orange glow of the streetlight, was completely deserted. I stood there for a long time just listening. The sound didn't come back. The silence rushed in again, feeling even heavier than before. I tried to shake it off, a trick of a tired mind. I was sleep-deprived, over-caffeinated, and I stare into a void for a living. Of course I was hearing things. I went back to my desk, forced myself to write another paragraph, and finally fell into a restless sleep, the memory of that single, impossible giggle stuck in my head. A week passed, then 2. I didn't hear it again, and the memory started to fade. I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Then came the night of the swings. It was storming this time, a real autumn squall with rain hitting the windows and the wind howling. I was actually grateful for the noise. It drowned out the house's usual groans and my own thoughts. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I glanced out the little window over the sink, which looks out at the same playground. One of the swings was moving, not just swaying in the wind. The other 3 swings were being thrown around like crazy, their chains rattling. But this one swing, the one on the far right, was moving smoothly. Back and forth, back and forth. Like a kid had just pushed off and was sailing into the air. It was a steady, rhythmic motion, totally different from the chaos of the other swings. I just watched, mesmerized, as it kept up its impossible arc. My blood ran cold. The logical part of my brain was scrambling for an explanation. A weird gust of wind. Was the chain a different length? But the excuses felt pathetic. I was seeing something that just felt wrong. That feeling of being watched crept over me, raising the hairs on my arms. I suddenly felt sure that if I looked long enough, I'd see the ghost of a child sitting right there on that swing. I yanked the blinds shut, my heart pounding. After that, my skepticism started to crack. The incidents became more frequent, more specific. The laughter came back, but it wasn't just a single giggle anymore. Sometimes it sounded like 2 kids, whispering and laughing just out of sight. I'd rush to the window, holding my breath, and see nothing but the same empty, wet playground. The sounds were always gone by the time I looked, which just left me wondering if I'd heard them at all. That was the worst part, not knowing what was real. I started to feel like a rat in a maze. My work fell apart. I couldn't sleep. I spent hours at my window, not writing, just watching, waiting. The playground wasn't just scenery anymore. It was the center of my world. It had this power over me, this silent invitation. I became obsessed. Finally, I did what anyone does when they're scared and confused. I turned to the internet. I spent a weekend digging through local history forums, newspaper archives, and paranormal websites. I found tons of stories about the playground, most of them the same ghost stories I'd already heard. But then I found something different, tucked away in a forum thread from over a decade ago, started by a guy who claimed he used to live in my house. He wrote about the laughter and the swings, just like I'd experienced. But his story went further. He talked about feeling like he was being toyed with. He said the sounds started to change, to adapt. He said the laughter sometimes sounded like it was coming from inside his own house. He described this creeping paranoia, the feeling that the playground wasn't just haunted, but that it was smart, that it was learning him. He'd sold the house at a loss after 6 months, writing that he felt like he was losing his mind. His last post was one chilling sentence: "It's not a ghost, it's a trap." That hit me like a punch to the gut. A trap. The word echoed with this awful, terrifying clarity. This wasn't some sad echo of the past. It was active, it was deliberate, and it was focused right on me. The isolation I'd wanted so badly when I moved here was now the thing that was going to kill me. I was alone in this old house, staring at that playground every night, and something was staring back. That forum post changed everything. My fear, which had been this vague, creepy feeling, was now sharp and specific. I wasn't dealing with sad little ghosts. I was facing an opponent, an unseen intelligence that was actively trying to take me apart. The playground was its weapon, and my mind was the target. And then, the phenomena started to evolve. It was like, now that I knew it was smart, it had permission to get more creative, more personal. The generic laughter of some unknown kid was replaced by something much, much worse. One night, I heard a giggle that made my blood freeze. It wasn't just any giggle, it was the exact bubbly laugh of my younger sister Sarah from an old home video, a video from her 5th birthday party 20 years ago. The sound was crystal clear, and it seemed to come from right below my window. I stumbled over to look, hands shaking. How was that possible? The playground was empty, but the sound had been so real, a sound locked away in my own memories, now being played back to me from that cursed ground. That was its masterpiece. That was the true horror of it. It wasn't just making noise anymore, it was digging through my memories. It was weaponizing my own life, twisting moments of love and happiness into tools of terror. This was a psychological trap. It proved it had access to the most private parts of my mind. The horror wasn't just outside my window anymore. It was inside my head. My grip on reality started to slip. I started losing time. I'd sit down at my desk, glance at the clock, 9:14 p.m., and then blink, and the clock would read 11:30 p.m. 2 hours, just gone. I had no memory of what happened. My coffee would be cold, a half-written sentence on the screen that I didn't remember typing. Objects started moving. I'd leave my keys on the hook by the door, only to find them on my nightstand. I'd put a book on my desk and find it back on the shelf. At first I blamed myself, stress, forgetfulness, but it happened too often. It was a subtle, constant gaslighting. The thing was dismantling my trust in my own senses, making me question every single thing I did. Then came the compulsion, a pull. I found myself drawn to the playground. It started as a flicker of curiosity and grew into this gnawing need. I knew it was a trap. Every rational part of me screamed to stay inside, to lock the doors, board up the windows. But the rational part of my brain was losing the fight. The pull felt like a whisper, a promise that if I just went out there, I would finally understand. It's the same stupid logic that makes a character in a horror movie go into the basement, a siren song for the damned. I felt haunted by my own past. The attacks got more specific. It brought up things I had buried for years. The sound of a lullaby my mother used to sing. The exact mocking laugh of a childhood bully. It was like the thing in the playground had unzipped my brain and was rummaging through it, looking for the sharpest memories to throw at me. The more I feared, the more vivid its attacks became. My isolation had become a cage. I didn't dare tell anyone. Who would believe me? They'd say I was crazy, and I was half convinced they'd be right. I was alone with this silent, patient predator that was slowly taking my world apart. The laughter from the playground wasn't real, not like a ghost is real. It was a tool, a scalpel. and it was being used to dissect my sanity. The playground wasn't haunted by the dead. It was a hunting ground for something that preys on the living, and I was the prey. I knew I couldn't resist the pull forever. Soon I was going to walk out there. I was going to step into the trap. The night I finally went, the air was cold and dead still. The moon was just a sliver, giving off almost no light. The world felt like it was holding its breath. The pull wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was a physical ache, an irresistible command. I didn't decide to go. My body just stood up from my desk, walked downstairs, and unlocked the front door. My mind was just along for the ride, a horrified spectator, watching through the eyes of a puppet. I walked across the empty street, my footsteps booming in the silence. The crunch of my shoes on the gravel path was the only sound in the universe. With every step, the dread got worse, a physical pressure in my chest. The air got colder, a real drop in temperature. I stopped right at the edge of the wood chips. For a moment, nothing happened. The playground was perfectly, deathly still. And then I stepped onto the wood chips. The world exploded. Tea started with a single creak. One swing started to move back and forth, slow and deliberate. Then another joined it and another, until all four were swinging in this horrible, unsynchronized dance. The merry-go-round started to turn, groaning at first, then faster and faster until it was just a blur. Then came the laughter. It wasn't the faint giggle from before. This was a wall of sound, a tidal wave of it, hitting me from every direction. It was 1,000 children laughing with this manic, terrifying glee. The sound was warped, layered with a cruelty that curdled my blood. It was the sound of joy turned into a weapon. And then I saw them. They weren't ghosts. They were shadows, flickering, man-shaped voids that darted around the edges of my vision. I'd try to focus on one, a small figure by the slide, and it would just dissolve, only to reappear a second later by the swings. They were impossibly fast, glitching between the equipment. They had the shape of children, but they were hollow, like puppets made of darkness. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot, a helpless audience for this evil circus. The laughter got louder, piercing, drilling into my skull. The shadows danced faster. I could feel my mind starting to crack. I squeezed my eyes shut, clapped my hands over my ears, but it did nothing. The sound wasn't outside anymore. It was in my head. And then, just as I felt the last thread of my sanity about to snap, it all stopped. In an instant. Silence. The swings froze in midair, then fell still. The merry-go-round groaned to a halt. The laughter vanished, just cut off like a switch was flipped. The silence that came after was more terrifying than the noise. I opened my eyes. The playground was still. The shadows were gone. I was completely alone. And in that crushing silence, the final, horrible realization hit me. There were no children here. There were no ghosts. The moving swings, the demonic laughter, the dancing shadows. It was all a show, a performance built just for me. There was no monster to fight. The true horror was the artist behind it all, a patient predator that had watched me, learned me, and then built this perfect, personalized hell. It didn't have to show itself. Its power wasn't in some physical form. It was in its ability to break my reality, to turn my own mind into a torture chamber. The climax wasn't some terrifying monster reveal. It was the terrifying understanding. I hadn't been haunted. I had been studied. I had been played. And the point of the game was simply to make me know that it had won. It broke me without ever showing its face. I don't remember walking back to the house. The next thing I knew, I was standing in my office as the sun came up. My body ached. My throat was raw, but I don't remember screaming. I looked out the window at the playground. It was empty. Still. Just metal and plastic, waiting for the sun. It looked exactly like it did the day I moved in. Innocent. The show was over. The trap had been sprung. The haunting stopped completely. The swings don't move anymore. The nights are silent again. To anyone else, it would look like it was over. But I know the truth. It hasn't ended. It just moved. It moved from the playground into my head. This house isn't a sanctuary anymore. It's just a bigger cage. The horror used to be outside my window. Now, it's everywhere. I'll be washing dishes and hear a faint, childish giggle in the sound of the running water. I'll be reading, and in the rustle of a turning page, I'll hear a whisper from my past. The static from the TV will sound like that lullaby my mother used to sing. My own brain is turning on me, rewired by the trauma to find patterns in everything, to hear whispers in the silence. The entity doesn't need to haunt my house. It haunted my perception. It planted a seed of paranoia that's now wrapped around my sanity. Can I trust what I hear? Can I trust what I see? The line between reality and its lingering influence is gone. Every shadow is a figure in the corner of my eye. Every creak of the floorboards is a footstep. It didn't need to destroy me physically. It just needed to break my trust in my own mind. And it succeeded. I still live here. I don't know why. Maybe I'm too broken to leave. Maybe I feel some sick connection to my own personal hell. Or maybe, and this is the thought that keeps me up at night, I'm afraid that if I leave, it will follow me. That it's not tied to the playground at all, it's tied to me. I still sit at my desk and look out the window. The playground is always empty now. The local kids avoid it. It just sits there, silent and waiting. I know it's just a matter of time. Sooner or later, someone new will move in. Someone curious, someone skeptical, someone who works late and will look out their window into the night. They'll hear a faint, distant sound, the sound of children's laughter, and they'll dismiss it, just like I did. They won't know that the laughter is a lure. They won't know that they're being watched by two sets of eyes, the thing in the playground and the broken man in the window across the street. The scariest stories are the ones that don't end, the ones that follow you home and whisper to you in the dark. If you appreciate stories that get under your skin and stay there, maybe subscribe for more. And if you have a place you can't forget, an experience you can't explain, share it in the comments. Sometimes knowing you're not the only one is the only defense we have. Stay safe and listen carefully to the silence. Sometimes it isn't empty at all.